While everyone knows and loves the music that Alan Wilder and Dave Gahan created together, few realize that there was a lot more going on in their relationship than meets the eye. We can all agree that they had fantastic chemistry and that fans adored them while they were on stage together. But many have wondered whether our sunny perception of them as friends and bandmates is actually accurate. That is, not totally, anyway. What am I trying to convey here? Given that Alan has finally come clean about the terrible reality about his connection with Dave and how it caused him to leave their band Depeche Mode, these are some of the lesser-known facts about their tumultuous relationship that you really must know. Many of you probably remember the now-famous farewell letter Alan penned, in which he famously claimed that he felt grossly undervalued by the band because no one paid attention to his abilities or efforts. While the specifics of their private meetings remain a mystery, it is highly probable that the fact that the band initially failed to recognize him as an integral part of the lineup upon his 1982 arrival contributed significantly to the negative feelings expressed in the letters. Alan wasn't allowed in the studio. He was only allowed to work on live shows and promotional materials. Speculation has also circulated that he may have been given a fee or salary rather than an equal part of royalties at that time. Although he likely felt immense frustration, he was fortunate to secure the gig due to the band's popularity and promising future. His 6-month trial period stretched into 11, and he was only finally recognized as a full member and credited on DM studio recordings starting with Get the Balance right after an 11-month wait. It's also true that Dave Andy and Vince Martin were from significantly more privileged backgrounds than Alan. This further complicated matters in his connection with Dave and the rest of the group. Another major point of contention between Dave and Alan was his battle with substance misuse. There is a shadowy aspect to being a rock star, and Dave was no different. Among his many significant health problems and addictions, his heroin usage in the 90s was the most dangerous. He came dangerously close to losing his life due to an overdose once. There was that one time Dave overdosed to the point that he was clinically dead and had to be revived. In an interview he gave in 2013, reflecting on the incident, he described the disturbing details. During his out-of-body experience, he saw the paramedics rushing to his aid. In light of the foregoing, it is clear that Dave struggled greatly with substance misuse, which undoubtedly affected his performance and caused friction within the band, where members yearned for growth and were eager to reach new heights. There was a clear conflict of interest between the two parties, and Alan was one of those enthusiasts. Consequently, their relationship was strained. Were Alan's disagreements solely with Dave? No, I can tell you that with absolute certainty, because it has long been known that Andy and Dave had serious disagreements, and that many of these issues have been ignored. According to several fans, Alan was the most used and underappreciated band member, who was constantly shortchanged despite his many accomplishments. Prior to delving further into this, let's endeavor to comprehend the precise origins of these disparities. I've already brought up the fact that Alan's socioeconomic background was different from the rest of the band, which caused friction between him and Dave. However, we neglected to discuss how this affected Alan's interactions with other band members, such as Andy. Although everyone else was from the working class in Basildon, Alan was from a middle-class family in London. This contributed to his early rejection from the band, despite the fact that he was clearly financially worse off than the other three when he joined. In instance, Andy hated it when Alan pretended he wasn't bass. As a result of his formal musical training, Alan brought a far more polished and professional attitude to his musical performances. However, the punk philosophy of not requiring musical knowledge or significant ability with instruments was the driving force for Vince and Andy's decision to form a synth band. Because of this huge schism in the group's musical philosophy, we can only speculate as to the tremendous degree of creative discord that existed among the members. The recording of Enjoy the Silence was a time when Alan and Andy got into some really heated arguments. While Andy had in mind a straightforward recording of a tune, Alan wanted to incorporate a Pet Shop Boys-style speed, while Flood added additional layers. The situation became so heated that other members of the band had to step in and beg them to relax. As the years progressed, more and more band strains became apparent in 1985 as DM began to carve out their own unique sound apart from Daniel Miller. This put Alan in an even worse position, as he was disproportionately blamed for it. The sonically intricate albums that followed Black Celebration increased Alan's workload tremendously, while the rest of the band remained largely unchanged. Makes no sense at all, does it? Another key reason for the tension between them was that Andy had an equal say in band matters and could be extremely critical in the studio, even if he couldn't contribute musically. However, Andy continued to receive the same salary despite his lack of musical contributions, all because he was buddies with the boss. Alan was in the thick of things in 1992, what with leading the charge on both the digital and performing sides of the album's production. Since Alan was responsible for creating the tour mixes while his colleagues were on vacation, the subsequent religious and exotic trips in 1993 and 1994 were equally taxing on him. The imbalance in workload was never Alan's complaint. Rather, it was the lack of recognition of his efforts. It probably wasn't about money per se, but he was clearly irritated that he and Andy split the profits equally despite their drastically different efforts. In addition, the band's albums and live performances were labors of love for Alan. Everything from playing and producing to handling drums and samples, the list goes on, was heavily influenced by him. Fletch, who was barely noticeable in the studio and had minor roles on tour, made the same amount as him, despite his substantial efforts. Thus, Fletch was also getting overpaid, not only Andy. Alan had little choice but to accept the situation, even though he felt it was unfair, because Martin and Fletch were close friends and original band members. This is just the beginning of the disagreements and tensions, though, so hold on. Additional details exist. Martin got royalties for his work as the band's principal songwriter, something you might already be aware of. He had rudimentary rhythms and sound design in his demos, but they had most of the lyrics, chords, and hooks. Alan expanded upon these demos by incorporating bass lines, melodies, and rhythms. What does it mean to be a songwriter? And should Martin have given Alan more credit for his significant contributions as a co-writer, are questions this incident brings to light. The fact that Martin got complete credit for writing the songs makes no sense at all, especially considering that other bands sometimes split the composition duties across many members. Despite all these unsettling happenings, Dave seems completely unconcerned and uninterested. However, as is common knowledge, there are always competing narratives, and this instance is no different. There is a school of thought that maintains Alan and Dave were constantly at odds with one another, while another school of thought maintains the opposite. Some even go to the extent of saying that he and Dave had the strongest bond. Compared to everyone else, the two were extremely close. Additionally, these individuals often bring up how the main problem was the dynamic between Martin and Fletch, particularly after Fletch admitted his mistakes multiple times regarding his departure from the band. Were the tensions between Alan and Dave real, or are these claims based on nothing more than hearsay? Please inform us in the space provided.